Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fernando Paragas, President of the Philippine Association for Communication and Media Research, Incorporated, and the Dean here at the UP College of Mass Communication. Today's topic is the politics of methods, and our webinar will be an active inquiry into the history, ideological underpinnings, rationale, uses and applications of research methods, and what truth claims they serve and the character of research values that they seek to instill. The debate and complementarity between quantitative and qualitative approaches, as well as the continuum of multi and or mixed methods, have long been staple and central concerns in the conduct of media and communication research. I am very pleased we have leading researchers to help us explicate this contentious terrain for us. I would like to thank our research persons today, Dr. Elma Laguna of UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, Dr. Jeremaiah Opiniano of the University of Santo Tomas, Dr. Cheryll Soriano of De La Salle University, and Dr. Violeda Umali of the UP College of Mass Communication. Unahan ko na napakahusay ng mga ito at bagay na bagay talaga sila sa ating topic today. In my opening remarks today, I want to talk about one of the lessons from my parents, which I feel directly relate to today's topics. And the lesson is that the ends do not justify the means. Regardless of the seeming groundbreaking nature of our research findings, if the ways by which we arrive at them are founded on an absence of rigor and ethicality, then there is not really much value to them. If the means are problematic to begin with, the answers we give to the problems we pose are to be taken not even with a grain of salt. Conversely, the means justify the ends. A well-conceptualized and implemented research design, grounded in theory, aligned with the paradigms, and coherent to the problem and objectives, serve as a foundation upon which the integrity of our findings and our reputation as researchers rest upon. This life lesson also links to PACMRI's Masterclass in Mentoring series, which is now on its penultimate webinar. The MIM webinar series is PACMRI's means to our shared goal to promote quality and quantity in communication and media research. And I am extremely pleased it seems to be a worthwhile means. Thus far, 18 of our country's top scholars have talked about the conceptual and practical dimensions of key components of the research process. With our 4 speakers today and the 3 speakers in our final webinar, the series would have gathered 25 of our best researchers in the Philippines in our discipline. Hundreds of you have attended our live events and thousands of viewed our videos online. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Towards the end of fostering a vibrant community of communication and media researchers in our country, I am pleased to help announce, on behalf of our dear friends and colleagues, the many activities in our field in this last quarter of the year. So I have curated some of the activities that we have in our field. So this one is upcoming October 20 to 2022. The Communication and Media Studies Conference to be held at Central Scholar University, featuring Professor Tapio Varis and Dr. Jonathan Ong. So shout out sa ating mga kasamahan sa PACE. Ayan. So the registration link is here, and later on, when you watch the video, you can also review the link here. ADCEP, our friends in development communication, ADCEP is hosting its 10th National Conference and Scientific Meeting from December 1 to 3 at the Batangas State University, and the deadline is forthcoming this October 30. So please do submit your papers. Again, you can go to the Facebook page of ADCEP for details. At the same time, shout out naman sa ating mga kaibigan sa Far Eastern University. They have the first framework Asia Pacific Communication Conference, and the deadline is this October 31, 2022. You can submit your abstracts to framework at feu.edu.ph, or you can visit their the Facebook page at FEU Framework. The conference will be held from November 24 to 25, 2022. Our friends at PACMRI are also busy. So I've just elected a new set of board of directors. You can see here. So congratulations for the continuity of the institution. Very nice, no? And we have the nationwide MIL contest naman, which PACMRI is helping organize with several institutions, also our friends in DevCom and AIJC. So yan, UNESCO naman ito, #Global MIL Week PH. I know a number of you who are participating in our mentoring series are from senior high school, so this may be something your students will be interested in. So again, there's the PAMIL.ph Facebook page link. This came to us. We have friends from Halim University, and they've requested us to help promote their MA and PhD program in media and communication because they have a long history of scholars from the Philippines joining them. So our friend, Dr. Michael Preeler, posted his kindly sharing his email address here for you to contact. Again, this was also posted in the PACMRI Facebook page. Kami naman, dito sa UP, we have a couple of events. So on, I think this Friday, and please register on or before Thursday midnight, we have a public roundtable discussion on gender norms, initiatives, and social media. So this will be via Zoom if you want to join. And also, this will be live streamed in various Facebook pages. So you can check the link in our PSMR Facebook page and the Department of Communication research page as well. Ito yung mainit-init. Kanina lang ito. The Philippine Media Monitoring Laboratory of the UP Department of Communication Research has launched just early at 1 o'clock the Digital Public Pulse Research Report. It's now available, so download your copy. You can find the link at the PMM UP Commerce page or the Department of Communication Research page or at the PACMRI Facebook page. So you can download your copy. It's 300 pages long. 397 pages to be exact, and it's, I think, content. Now, this is the report on the big data analytics that we did with regard to the 2022 Philippine general elections. So ito, these are the chapters. You can see how thoroughly we covered the social media dynamics in the last election. So please do download later. So yun. So I'm really happy that, it seems that we are really creating a very vibrant community of communication and media researchers. Everyone's pitching in from different fields, subfields, and organizations. So please do participate. So before we proceed to the webinar proper, the usual reminders of our house rules. So the event is being recorded for uploading later, and hi to our friends who are accessing our videos asynchronously. So please mute your video and audio and use the speaker view for optimal viewing experience. And then please your full name as your screen name because we randomly check attendance. And to post a question or comment, please type in the chat box or raise your hand later on during the open forum. We will give certificates to those who complete the 7 Masterclass webinars and accomplish each of the evaluation forms for the 7 Masterclass webinars. So yeah. Now let me proceed to the program proper of today's webinar. Let me introduce our moderator this afternoon, Dr. Violeda Umali, who's a professor at the Department of Communication Research at the College of Mass Communication, University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is also the current chair of the CMC Department of Graduate Studies. So please, I think the admission cycle will be open soon. So if you're interested in joining our graduate studies programs, Ashish, you're going to be your contact person. Dr. Umali obtained her PhD in political science degree from the University of Vienna, Austria, as a fellow of the Initiative Colleague Vienna School of Governance, Master of Mass Communication from the Nanyang Technological University as a recipient of the ASEAN Postgraduate Scholarship, and MA Demography and BA Communication Research from UP Diliman. She was director of UPD's Research Dissemination and Utilization Office in 2011 to 2014 and has been a regular fellow of the Social Weather Station since 2005. She has contributed book chapters in publications by Routledge, Lidverlag, and the Asian Media Information and Communication Center, and co-edited several issues of Claridel, a Philippine Journal of Communication, Media, and Society. Her current research focuses on mediated communication as it links with politics and governance, population dynamics, and leisure. So my friends, let us all welcome Dr. Violeda Umali. Prof. Umali, the floor is yours.
Sige, thank you, Dean Hernan. And Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the sixth and the second to the last session in the webinar series of PACMRI. So please allow me to share my slides again before I continue. Okay, so I hope you can see my slide already.
Started screen share. Yan na, okay na.
Okay, sige. So as you know, the focus of the session this afternoon is the politics of methods. Dean Hernan gave us an overview of what the method is all about. Of course, we still have to break down the explanation of the focus in terms of the discussion framework that we have adopted. The four of us in the panel have adopted. But let me clear some items first, because I think that when you hear the term the politics of methods, what comes to mind is about the arguments on the uses and abuses of methods. But I would like to clarify that this webinar is not about that. Because first, it's such a broad topic and it's not possible to cover that in a 2-hour session. But more importantly, because we believe that discussions on the uses and abuses of research methods are adequately already discussed in literature, whether scholarly or popular. So how did we decide to tackle the topic of politics of methods? We decided to anchor our discussions on the three concepts that we referred to when we discuss the philosophy that guides the way we look at things and the way we do things. And of course, I refer to the three concepts of ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Medyo big words pa rin, but I think they are familiar to you. So before I explain in detail our discussion framework, let me introduce first the rest of the members of the panel in the order that they will speak. So the first to speak is Dr. Cheryll Soriano, who will cover the topic on ontology and methods. Dr. Soriano is professor in the Department of Communication of De La Salle University, Manila, where she also holds a professorial chair in the humanities. Her published works examine the intersections of digital cultures, platformization, and social justice. As principal investigator of Fair Work Philippines, her current research explores digital communication and transformations in labor and organizing in the digital economy. She is the author of Philippine Digital Cultures Brokerage Dynamics on YouTube, published by the Amsterdam University Press this year, and co-editor of Asian Perspectives on Digital Culture, Emerging Phenomena, Enduring Concepts, published in 2016 by Routledge. Dr. Soriano is Associate Editor of the Asian Journal of Communication and CMC's International Journal Plaridel. And she also sits in the editorial boards of top journals in the field, such as Journal of Communication, Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, Journal of Applied Communication Research, Communication Culture and Critique, and Environment and Planning, Economy and Space. She has held visiting fellowships in RMIT University in Australia and Peking University in China. Our next speaker is Dr. Jeremaiah Opiniano, who will talk about epistemology and research methodology. He is a graduate of he obtained his PhD from the University of Adelaide in Australia. And he is a faculty member of the University of Santo Tomas, where he teaches research methods in the undergraduate and graduate journalism programs. He is also the director of UST's Research Center for Social Sciences and Education. Outside of the academe, he runs the Institute for Migration and Development Issues, a nonprofit think tank that focuses on international migration issues. He does mixed methods research in the social sciences and also writes journalistic articles on overseas Filipinos. For the third segment, axiology and research methodology, that would be myself and Dr. Elma Laguna. So Dr. Laguna is Assistant Professor of Demography at the UP Population Institute. She obtained her doctoral degree in social sciences and economics from the University of Bremen in Germany. She has a master in demography degree from the UPPI and Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication Research from UPCMC. She was past president of the Philippine Population Association. Her areas of expertise include youth, sexuality, migration and intergenerational relationships, aging and retirement, demographic and health surveys, and quantitative research methods. Sorry, I forgot to flash her image. So yan, Elma, I'll give you some seconds of Zoom time. Okay, so now back to the framework of our discussion. So as I've said, ontology, epistemology, and axiology, and of course in ontology, as we know, refers to the researcher's beliefs about the nature of reality. And what we would like to emphasize this afternoon is the very important point that our view of the research worlds that we venture into greatly influences how we will study that worlds. So research worlds can be physical or virtual, and within each world, there are subworlds. So you can talk about population sectors like women, children, elderly, and so on. And in the virtual world, you have parang a duplication of those physical worlds. And then we have a number of online communities as well. So our basic assumptions of these worlds and the people and entities that inhabit these worlds impact on our decisions on methods or methodology. So Dr. Cheryll Soriano will give us more points about the connections between ontology and methodology by sharing with us her research on digital cultures. Now, for the second anchor, which is epistemology, we know that it refers to how we come to know what we know. And for this afternoon, what we would like to do is to deconstruct or take apart a little bit the process of knowing in research against the backdrop that research is a collaborative undertaking wherein participants bring into the process their respective epistemological preferences. So Dr. Jeremaiah Opiniano will problematize epistemology in the context of a multi-country research that he is involved in. And of course, what we can expect is that in a multi-country setting, the respective scholarly dispositions and cultural sensibilities of the collaborators will at some point, collide and at some point also converge. Now, for the third anchor, which is axiology, of course, we know that axiology refers to, or we normally associate that with ethical behavior. So in research, axiology refers to what we believe is valuable and ethical. So in relation to methods, Dr. Laguna and I would like to talk about how our values and scholars, as scholars and persons, determine how we implement research, but also conversely, how our research experiences on the ground could lead us to rethink our taken for granted assumptions about our relationships with research itself, with the research collaborators and research participants. So without much ado, here we are, Dr. Soriano, Dr. Opiniano, Dr. Umali, and Dr. Laguna. We are the soul team, and we invite you to join us in our discussion about the soul of research through the examination of the politics of methods. So, Dr. Soriano, I give you the floor.
Thanks so much for that, amazing introduction to our framework, Dr. Umali. Let me just have a few seconds to share my screen. And I understand we have about 15 minutes, so if I can get a signal from someone, if in case I'm approaching the...
Again, Dr. Cheryll, I will raise my hand.
You can kind of a pros. Thank you, Dr. Nan. Yeah. So it's really... I'm getting a notice. Am I still audible?
Yes, but you are choppy sometimes.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I hope I could make this work, or maybe I could stop my video na lang. Right. So it's really a process of trying to drill down or reflect on the nature of our research and also our methodological choices and also avoidances. And my second slide here pertains a little bit more to some concerns about methods that perhaps we all share as mentors, but also this is from my experience as thesis mentor, also teaching research methods and also reviewing some scholarly manuscripts.
Doctor,
That I divided into three things. Yeah, sorry.
pwede paki-full slide view yung PowerPoint.
Naka-slide view na siya. You're not able to see it?
Naka-ano siya, regular view, not slide view. I'm not sure if it's only me.
Oh, really? Well, from my view, it's already on presentation. But
Let us ask it. Dr. Umali, how is it on your end?
Yung ano, hindi siya yung presentation view.
Really? Let me just try if I could begin with this one. So I'm now slide showing. Is it working?
I can see you clicking it, but it's not going to presenter mode.
So when I do that, it says Zoom.
Ayan, may comment. I think need you po i-change yung screen na nakashare, ma'am. Oh, please try to reshare na lang.
Is this viewable for you?
Yes, now it works. Yeah.
Okay. It looks like my application needed to reboot. Okay, so I'll continue. So three things: choice, avoidance, and judgment. So based on my experience of mentoring research projects from my students and thesis, also teaching research methods, but of course, something that I think you might share also as your experience with mentoring. So first, in terms of choice, we might see students picking methods that are not necessarily in harmony with the object of the reality or the nature of the phenomenon they're really investigating. Or sometimes they might be picking or mixing methods. And there's nothing much wrong about mixing methods. It's about more of whether the mixing of these methods pertain or they have a clear understanding of the possible philosophical contradictions, but also the complementarity in addressing the nature of their investigation as they mix these methods. Or third, they might be choosing certain methods because they think this will allow them to produce research faster. Kasi ito yung available, this will allow us to produce research faster or facilitate more publishable or more citable kinds of research. Or, on the converse, the lack of choice might be pertaining to being forced to embrace certain natures of investigation and consequently methods due to funder, mentor, or fashion or trends in research. Now we move to avoidance. So sometimes you might also see students avoiding methods that look intimidating or choosing what they might think as easier methods, implying that they have something in their heads about easy or more sophisticated or more complex kinds of methods, or vice versa too. Or more importantly, in avoidance, we might see theses and dissertations that have design and methodology sections that extensively discuss the who, where, what, when, and how, but essentially silent and avoiding the why of the chosen methodology in relation to the nature of their investigation. And lastly, in terms of judgment, we might see students, for example, approaching us, asking us validity standards from another paradigm to apply for a research methodology within another paradigm. So for example, when doing a qualitative research, a student might ask you, is this sample size enough? Or ang liat-liat yatang sample size ko. So it's a clear kind of a contradiction or inconsistency in terms of how they're looking at the standards of goodness or validity of their own research. Or lastly, the inability to critique or judge the coherence of research design. And so what I focus on today will argue or emphasize further arguments about the idea that how we consider the nature of reality, how we consider what is real, what can be studied, has important implications on the methodologies that we pursue. And that our methodological choices also tell us about what sources of knowledge we trust, what constitute evidence in relation to what we have set to investigate, as well as the processes to arrive at evidence that build that knowledge. We know that research methods are infused with their own philosophical assumptions of reality and value surrounding the process of knowing. And knowing these three prongs in the process of method sense making will help us as mentors and also our students in making sense of their methodological choices and also avoidances. So thanks to Dr. Umali, so I guess I don't need to talk about ontology much anymore, but more of to illustrate this with a few examples. So knowing that ontology is what is real, I guess in some of the examples that I will be showing throughout the discussions, it will illustrate for us, for example, that the very way by which we think about reality, or the very way we think about what is communication, or how we understand media, and what entities constitute communication, what processes constitute communication, or what entities or processes constitute media, and essentially what constitute media and communication research kind of leads us to particular aspects of investigation, while also at the same time setting aside others. So for example, if we are still within the transmission model of communication, we might see communication as simply a flow of messages from a sender to a receiver. We might want to investigate, for example, the flows of those messages from one point to another point. But if we are embracing, or if we have embraced for example, the constitutive model of communication, we see communication as much more complex in that our messages and practices of exchanging construct organizations, politics, and cultures. So in short, from the very fundamental point of view, how we think about communication and how we teach communication in our classrooms, how we teach media and what we understand to be media, right, will significantly affect what kinds of investigations and parang flowing further, what kinds of methods our students will be adopting. And so in connection to ontology, epistemology nga, no, is the science or the study of how we come to know what we know, but also how we discriminate the rational from the non-rational. And when I speak to my students about epistemology, I'll show them, for example, a slew of methods or a slew of sets of evidences, for example, like this. And then I'll ask them, which of the following tells you about reality? And they might tell me, Miss, I think all of them tell me about reality. But when I start to ask them, which of these produce evidence that you think is more valid or reliable than others, that's when they start to manifest their biases about methods and also about what kinds of realities they ought to investigate. So when we start to ask our students to weigh particular kinds of evidence over others, that's when they start to manifest their own definitions of better, best, good methods, bad methods. And therefore, we need to drill deeper on the assumptions that they hold over these methods to begin with. And now I'll start to show a few examples of the connections between ontology, but also epistemological choices and also methodological choices. I'll begin with the nature of the phenomenon. So some of you who are teaching research methods might already be familiar with the work of Jennifer Mason. So Jennifer Mason identifies the first key question when anyone wants to conduct a research investigation, and that is first to ask the question, what is the nature of the phenomenon that I want to investigate? And I think that question could be asked whether we are taking qualitative or quantitative methods. When we think about any topic that you have in mind, say trolling, say cancel culture, say health communication, we have a lot of puzzles in our heads, but we need to be able to identify what is at the heart of that investigation. It could be about people, it could be about texts and discourses, it could be about collectivities, it could be about connectedness, it could be about disconnectedness, or it could be examining institutions or the working of structures. I guess the heart of this is that whatever nature of the phenomenon that we choose here, it may have implications on what methods or what kinds of approaches will allow us to be able to answer or to address or to further study that particular nature of the phenomenon. And so a lot of things might influence how we perceive of the nature of the phenomenon that we investigate. So maybe our personal biases, our past scholarly disciplines, well, what we read, our theoretical framework, sometimes funding imperatives, what kind of data are available to us, the interests of our mentors, or research trends that are available to us. And we of course also need to be cognizant about what forces shape what kinds, how we look at particular phenomenon and what we identify as the nature of the phenomenon that we wish to investigate. But let me take one particular slice of a broader communication environment and a topic that has been on trend, say, for the past 5 years. So that is the topic of disinformation. Within the realm of disinformation, fake news, trolling, and daming research na lumalabas about that, different scholars look at disinformation looking at different natures of investigation. So, for example, again, some researchers look at social actors. Some of them look at texts and discourses. Some of them look at identities. Some of them look at institutions and structures. Some of them look at social processes. Some look at material cultures. And so here are, for example, sample focus of investigation. So some scholars looking at people or social actors might be looking at hypothetically testing out the relationship between psychological and behavioral traits and trolling. Others might want to look at the practice and the process of disinformation production. So, for example, asking the question, what characterizes the labor process involved in the production of disinformation? Or other scholars might be predisposed to look at effects or asking the question about what are the effects of disinformation on political behavior. What I show in the next slide are examples of actual studies on these things, but also how diverse the kinds of methodological choices they have adopted. So again, for example, that study on people, social actors, and motivations, a hypothesis testing was conducted by Sanfilippo, Fitchman, and Yang using a survey design to test out the relationship between trolling and psychological traits as well as behavioral dimensions. From the practice or the process side, because they saw that looking at the practice of producers of disinformation, right, is as important, for example, as the effects. So Ong and Cabañas, sometime in 2018, I believe they're continualists during the study, looked more at how this practice happens from the perspective of those involved in the production. There's also, of course, those that want to study effects. And effects here was examined through the use of an experimental design, examining the political behavior and disinformation. And then the group of Duffy, Tandok, and Ling naman engaged focus group design because they believe that group interactions are so crucial in the analysis of disinformation, and particularly how interpersonal relations among young people are affected by fake news sharing. And because they are very much interested in understanding group interactions and behaviors, they zoomed in on the method of, instead of individual interviews, focus groups, because they can see how social dynamics within groups could be manifested as they conduct their investigation. And then Lanuza and Arguelles looked at the media system analysis, on the other hand, because they are more interested in looking at the broader politics, structures, and media systems that facilitate differences in how this information is articulated across several countries in Asia. Or from the audience side, some scholars are more interested in parang hearing from the audiences. So how do audiences make sense of the information that they encounter online? And Tandok did that using survey analysis. But other scholars might be looking at not just the actual exchanges of people, they might be looking at what we call digital objects, meaning the things that we don't see, the operation of material artifacts as these interact with the way we use them. So the working of algorithms and social networks that are facilitated by platforms. So one example of my study with another communication, former UPCMC faculty, Fatima Gao, looked at social network analysis, looking at algorithmic recommendation systems and how they were reinforcing particular kinds of content over others. Now, I believe the Digital Public Pulse study also engaged some of this kind of an approach. Now naman, some scholars maybe want to prefer to drill down on meaning-making processes or, for example, the representation of particular power relations or ideologies in the process of this information production. So they might be asking the question, what power relations or ideologies are manifested, say, for example, in internet memes that feature the expression of fake news. So one study conducted multimodal critical discourse analysis, but many others have also conducted semiotic analysis of texts, memes, etc. And then lastly, I guess in my example here, some scholars might be wanting to look at the historical trajectory of disinformation. So a study of Donovan and Boyd looked at this from a case study of journalism, but they looked at the history of strategic silence and how this operates as a function of disinformation within the broader media environment, looking at the case study approach. So I guess this slide tries to bring together one crucial point that I wanted to make, that again, what we choose as the nature of the phenomenon that we wish to investigate within a slice, a thematic slice within the broader realm of communication, tells us also, or kind of prods us or leads us to particular questions that might best be answered by particular methods other than certain other methods. This gives us kind of an opening to kind of rationalize the choices of methods that we pick, for example. And so what I'm saying here is that when, what I always tell my students is that when they encounter, for example, within this, when they conduct their review of related literature of their topic, because oftentimes when they conduct a review of related literature, they conduct a conceptual RRL. Hindi ko alam kung common to sa experience nyo, but ito yung napapansin ko sa mga estudyante. They don't cover the methods in their RRL. So what I ask my students to do is also examine the methodological justifications that scholars in our field make and in your field of interest make. Why did this scholar A choose this particular method in relation to his, her, their nature of investigation or focus? Why this method? And then compare that with another literature in your field that uses naman a different approach or methodology. Why that? No? So look at scholars' justifications of their methodological choices, because it really helps us understand the differences in the thinking, not as we say, as Professor Umali says, the philosophy that these scholars take, no, whenever they choose methods. And this is so crucial because whatever we produce in the world, so regardless of what methodology we pick, but that will lead us to particular findings that tell us about our knowledge of the world, but without us being able to explain why we chose to conduct this approach or methodology to be able to arrive at that knowledge is as important as the knowledge that we're trying to offer to the table. Dr. Bragas, I'm just checking my time. Are we still okay?
Okay lang, tuloy mo lang siya. Maga pa naman.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I'll now go on to the sense making of methods, but also in relation again to the nature of the investigation, but also how we think about what we ought to look at. So as a qualitative researcher, I am more partial to ethnographic approaches, and I use a lot of observational methods in my research. But even as I mentioned, observational methods, this paradigm has expanded over the course of the past 15 years or so, no? As I will show in the next few slides. So, but first, let me begin by raising the question, why do I want to use observational methods in my research? The same question can be asked of, why do I want to use survey methods for my research? Or why do I want to use semiotic analysis for my research? So why might I want to participate in a research setting to generate data for my research? What are the shortcomings of using this method for my particular purpose? So in relation to what we are reading, it's important to ask the question, bakit kaya ito yung method that fits to a T that particular nature of the investigation that scholar asks? And then in the same way, you as a scholar should be asking the same question of your own methodological choices. So as an example, when we choose observational methods as a method for our research, it takes in an ontological position that sees interactions, actions, and behaviors as central to understanding reality. Ibig sabihin, kailangan mong pumunta doon sa site, kailangan mo siyang ma-experience because we believe that interactions, actions, and behaviors are so crucial to understanding that reality. Maybe you are interested in practice, in process, in language, and you want to see the social phenomena occurring naturally within a particular setting. It follows that you're taking also an epistemological position that accepts knowledge being possibly to be generated through observations and participating in natural settings. But also at the same time, you recognize that being in the field itself or the heart of it, or maybe staying there for an extended period of time, you recognize the possibility of your influence in the object of your investigation, but also the possibility of self-reflexivity or the value of self-reflexivity as so important to you in the process of knowing. So yes, it does put the researcher in the middle of the topic being studied. It's multidimensional. It studies an issue from a participant's frame of reference, not solely relying on what people say they do, or not relying on artificial or controlled settings. Or maybe you think the phenomenon cannot be understood in any other ways. So whatever method a student takes, the student needs to have a clear justification in their heads why this method addresses this particular phenomenon best and to a T. Here I mentioned the multimodality of observational methods, but over the past few years, new paradigms within observational methodology or the multi-dimensional or modal kinds of methods have also sprouted. So taking from the work here of Dix, Dix identifies 3 further sub-methodological paradigms within the multimodal multisensory data making. So that's social semiotic, ethnomethodological or the action-oriented research, and also the sensory or the experience-oriented kind of research, which I illustrate a little bit more in the following slide. So here, the very idea of observational methods and emphasizing the importance of experiencing reality in its multimodal dimensions is further divided into 3 paradigms that emphasize several particular aspects of reality over others. So for example, ethnomethodology looks more at the interactional or the social resources as capable of producing situations, workplaces, and institutions, and therefore it prioritizes looking at how ordinary social actors accomplish everyday tasks, conversations, situations, and practices, and how they rationalize these actions. So it will be inviting observational techniques or ethnographic interviews that allow us to not just observe, but also let others make sense of their actions and everyday conversations. The next paradigm within this already huge paradigm of multimodal approaches looks at social semiotics, or emphasizing semiotic resources as characterizing communicative environment. So what do we mean when we emphasize semiotic resources? Here, we focus on people's active choice of signifiers to produce their own signifieds. But here, we look at what kinds of signifiers people produce. So this could relate to methods like photo voice or visual ethnography, yung papadrawingin yung mga participants and then asking them to explain what those drawings mean to them or what those photos that they have taken mean to them. So in this paradigm, they wish to communicate and also looking at how the signifiers that we produce and the signifieds that these produce, no, what these implies, not to the thinking or to the head of our participants. And then the last one within the observational methods kind of banner are sensorial kinds of approaches. So here it emphasizes naman another aspect, which is the senses and how it looks at senses as producing perceptions. And so here it emphasizes not just our participants' sensory perceptions, but also the researchers' sensorial perceptions, exploring sensory meanings and handling various objects. So it could be the participants' own experience within the field, but also it could work with haptic technology. So for example, kunwari, no? Dating apps. So for example, people want to study the interaction of people with dating apps. Diba meron siyang swipe left, swipe right, gano'n. No? So what does swiping right mean? Os, pwedeng sabihin sa'yo, di ko alam, accept ba yun or reject or something. Or I like to pursue this person further. But what other meanings does that give to you? What does swiping mean to you? Pero pwedeng ganun din when we work with Netflix or other kinds of technologies. So the sensorial approach now kind of brings another layer in the observational dimension by looking at the working of multiple kinds of senses in our observations or investigation. But further on, in the context of the broader banner of ethnographic approaches naman within my field of research, nag-expand pa rin siya further, di ba? So there is that what we call in the beginning net or virtual ethnography, netnography, virtual ethnography, which examines people's engagement with each other online through participant observation techniques. Tapos meron pang now digital ethnography. Ang kaibahan naman niya, it examines people's engagement with digital media through participant observation techniques also. So netnography looks at people's interactions online. Digital ethnography looks at people's interactions with their own digital devices online and not. Right? So it allows us now to look further at magkaiba pa yung nature ng investigation na initritignan ng dalawang particular methods na ito, di ba? But also it raises, so the very nature of virtual ethnography or digital ethnographies also prods us to ask several other questions. I think this is my second to the last slide. Prods us to ask several other questions in relation to ontology or how we think of human beings in relation to the virtual and in relation to our interactions with the digital. So for example, when we study texts produced by humans, quote unquote, or digital texts, do we look at texts as people? Is an avatar a person? And the way we analyze them? To what extent do avatars represent our real persona? So how we answer this question might shape our approaches to research in certain ways. Ganon din yung, how do we think of tweets? Di ba? Daming tao, daming researchers studying Twitter and tweets. Do the tweets actually represent people's motivations, intentions, or perceptions? And do we study tweets as motivations in the same way as we would study people's motivations in the in-person environment? Now let's move on to the study of online communities. When people study online communities or students choose to do online communities, we ask the question, where do these communities start and end? Because when we talk about a barangay, hindi pa rin ganun easily definable yung boundaries niya, pero meron tayong possible na easy delineation of boundaries. But when we talk about online communities, they're rather dynamic and fluid. So where do these communities start and end? So paano mo scope yung study mo? And then there's also the notion of online culture. Sometimes people say, let's study cancel culture. Where do online culture start and end? What constitutes an online culture? And do online exchanges constitute culture? Again, our students' answers to these questions will or can inform the kinds of methodological choices that they will be making in the future. And I guess my last question here is our notions of public and private. What data from our participants can we ethically publicize? Plays out to our notion of good and bad, public and private at the same time. So all these have implications on methods, whether we like it or not. But it's important for us to kind of think about human interactions in the context, human or social interactions in the context of the digital environment, because while it might seem na parang digital version lang naman yan nung old methods na ginagamit ko, but is it really? So we need to invite our students to reflect a little bit more on this. So I guess I'll close with this couple of points, that how we see this reality of the phenomena or communication phenomena around us influences what we study and how we study it, and consequently the knowledge that we produce. And we need to be paying attention to also what lenses and paradigms frame our sense making and why we are choosing them. I'll end here. Thank you.
Can I share my screen? Oh, sorry.
Yes, Doc Jeremiah.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So with the permission of moderator and of course, Dr. Paragas, I will be reading from a script. Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Students and teachers present here reveal that the most hated activity in university study, called research, may have found its lovers, as well as those who somewhat love research. I was asked to share some thoughts on epistemology in research. I hope you won't mind if my metaphor for today's sharing is Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. The image seems appropriate in my view, and I'll explain later. And just before I forget, there's no need to call me doctor so that we can promote an egalitarian spirit here. Allow me also through this presentation to pay tribute to two Filipino giants in communication scholarship globally. One who first developed the discipline, and the other who formulated a theory that is part of the annals of international theories in communication. I have to admit that this sharing will ruffle feathers, but I am not here to wage combat with the rabid followers of certain quantitative or qualitative methods. I am here to trigger a reflection exercise about this so-called politics of methods. As mentioned earlier, I was assigned epistemology, which in the earlier presentation, Dr. Cheryll kind of neatly linked the ontology with epistemology. But briefly, let us share some basics about that word, epistemology, in the context of research. Epistemology concerns with how one examines reality, how knowledge is gathered and from which sources, and the theory or the science of the method. And looking at a model here called the research onion, coming from business scholars, epistemology covers the outmost layer of that onion, with the words positivism, critical realism, interpretivism, postmodernism, and pragmatism in it. The listed items in that outer layer of the onion may not be complete. This colorful diagram, one of my favorites in research methods class, basically distinguishes the quantitative from the qualitative. Nice and sunny, isn't it? Perhaps implying that these two separate worlds operate peacefully on their own. Easily, this diagram reveals the strengths of one and the weaknesses of the other. But behind the serenity of this diagram is a boxing match, resembling a Pacquiao versus Mayweather megabuck fight. This diagram thus segues me to what I wish to proffer today, acting like a referee in the ring. And I offer this overall point today. We are not here to challenge methods for the sake of it, or to become method-centric and overlooking the research questions. I offer the proposition that we can find ways to assure the rigor and congruence of the research project, from the research questions to the methods, and yet you let your method or methods display innovation that presents Philippine realities and analysis of a globally shared phenomenon. And then you contribute and challenge prevailing knowledge. By the way, allow me to share also that I am a general social science researcher with journalism studies being my outlet for communication scholarship. Let me share to everyone 2 personal observations that surround the politics of methods from an epistemological standpoint. The first observation is the innate bias with what researchers and methodologists are skilled at. Nothing wrong with it, of course, but they do not open themselves up to other possibilities, and they even discriminate others' methods. We respect your methodological preferences, of course. We also respect if you prefer data that are either numbers or words. Some may even be too fixated with certain inferential statistical tests, disregarding other quantitative designs. And with a few qualitative designs, but shunning newly emerging designs like what Cheryll presented earlier, beyond the case study, beyond the grounded theory, and beyond the phenomenology. Unfortunately, the boxing match persists to this day in the Facebook era, this second decade of the new millennium. This bias with certain methods even leads to cognitive dissonance, or worse, anger at other scientists, researchers, and even disciplines. So if I may say in Filipino, hindi pa rin ba tapos ang away na yan? Can we not move on from this tussle? I always believe that social phenomena can be studied either quantitatively, qualitatively, or through both paradigms, and Cheryll eloquently presented that. Nothing wrong that researchers get stuck up with the methods they usually do or favor doing. But this decades-long tussle or politics obscures the complexity of human diversity. And this politics even limits possibilities for new forms of knowledge or even methods to emerge. The second observation is that pressures quietly emerge to expanding understandings of social realities. This expansion challenges the epistemological status quo and even teeters to going back to that quantitative-qualitative debate. Let me give an example from economics. This paper tried to determine what do economists think of qualitative methods. Legitimately, the researcher here revealed that interviewed German economics professors, journal editors, and postdoctoral scholars fundamentally reject qualitative methods, quote unquote, due to methodological critique, a nomothetic worldview, meaning dealing with abstract, general, or universal laws, and missing career opportunities, end quote. But a year later, why did a Harvard University economist, the president of the International Economics Association, suddenly tell fellow economists to not be too fixated with econometrics, which he calls as imaginative statistical techniques, and accommodate qualitative methods? There's a Filipino doctoral student in New Zealand, a UST communication lecturer currently, who gave this Facebook status months ago. He's young, and he already noticed new winds of change in the human disciplines, of social sciences embracing the neurocognitive, and the others now searching for more thick description that comes from qualitative methods. And as he noticed, these scholars from varied disciplines are executing newer ways of answering research questions, even employing methods they questioned previously. So perhaps without much fanfare, I sense that the response of some scholars and methodologists to this quanti-quality debate is to explore boundaries and even, quote unquote, invent methods. Look at the book titles here. The traditionally discursive field of linguistics is trying out inferential statistics. Psychology, with its historical rootedness in quantitative methods, has made strides in accommodating qualitative and now mixed methods. Those in the humanities and cultural studies, aren't you perplexed that 2 book titles here see the employment of quantitative methods in the humanities including a book title here that says Multivariate Humanities, really? And there's even quantitative history, floated by University of Cambridge historians in the 1960s, that uses methods of statistical analysis drawn from the social sciences, but used historical data. Accountancy studies unsurprisingly fixate themselves with numbers, but recent scholarship has accommodated qualitative accounting and its research methods. It's not about the numeric audit reports anymore, but also the documents and the lives of auditors and accountants under study. The pharmaceutical studies and field have been advancing the concept of social pharmacy. So imagine these pharmacists trained in chemistry and related sciences doing social science research. See this paper? The German author here tried basic statistics in literary research as a response to skepticism of quantitative stylistics from both linguists and literary critics. I even think there are other examples similar to these materials, like the images on this next slide, revealing the invention of methods, quantitative ethnography from the anthropological discipline, personal attitude construct analysis from psychology, process tracing case study from political science, discursive news values analysis from journalism and linguistics. These scholars seem to have moved forward from the nagging quali-quanti debates and have created epistemological hybrids that you may never imagine to be possible. So given these two observations of mine, let us bring these to your attention. Yes, you, whichever epistemological orientation you adore to, you have your politics with methods. Again, let me repeat that I respect whatever method or methods you want to do. And given my two earlier observations, my guide questions to you are the following. One, are you closed, open-minded with a plethora of quantitative and qualitative methods around, assuming that you are open-minded, even if just a little bit, to other methodological possibilities? Do you have the listening ear to at least know these other methods you are not accustomed to do? If you suddenly become very open with methods, are you willing to learn? Well, the only thing here is that your left brain and your right brain will be exhausted. Two, do you want to innovate within either quantitative or qualitative methods? Would you like to learn of new inferential statistical techniques and quantitative designs? Or try out qualitative designs even for the first time and perhaps experience eureka moments? If you have been frequently doing, pardon me for the technical word, nonlinear autoregressive distributed lag analysis, or the NARDL, aren't you willing to try out logistic or probit regression? Yes, you have been analyzing interview data for your grounded theory or phenomenology. But what about trying out doodles, pictures, or other objects and make your grounded theory or phenomenology out of these unobtrusive data? A material I have read said that feminist researchers have traditionally invoked qualitative methods. But in 2004, feminist researchers Alison Tracy and Lynn Sorsoli employed a quantitative method called latent variable mixture modeling, or the LVVM. The authors contend here that LVVM, quote unquote, preserves essential qualitative differences while utilizing the breadth and statistical power of large sample data analysis, thereby combining the strengths of both the quantitative and the qualitative analytic paradigms, end quote. Tracy and Sorsoli also wrote, quote, many recognize that what makes a feminist method feminist is not that method, it's not in the method itself, but in the way it is applied, end quote. So do you want to innovate in research? Can you even make adjustments as to your research persona or your methodological arsenal? Would you be willing to learn further? And let me share some stories from Sampaloc. Our most prolific social science researcher is this guy, Alan de Guzman, former dean of our College of Education. Doc A, as his students and colleagues call him, has provided Filipino-style shortcuts or heuristics on how to get undergraduate and graduate thesis published in the world's top international journals. Education is his mother discipline, but he has also published in disciplines such as nursing, pharmacy, tourism, and business. He is currently co-editor-in-chief of the Taylor and Francis journal, Educational Gerontology, where he has co-authored 68 articles there. In his years of training his fellow Commission researchers on writing for international publication, he always shows this table, telling us that the scholarly journals that land in the leading indices, such as Scopus and the Web of Science, find article strength in the methods being employed. This table here just contains a few methodological designs, and there are more from his list. He had implemented these quantitative and qualitative designs. Due to the area lockdowns induced by COVID-19 transmission, De Guzman said researchers may need to rethink their ways and methods of doing. He calls it the COVIDification of research. This concept sees the researcher adapt to the lockdown situation and capitalizing on data from the internet to reconfigure research questions, arguments, designs, the corpora of data, and data analysis procedures. So he learned and implemented research designs, particularly qualitative content analysis. On this score, De Guzman had implemented 5 variants of qualitative content analysis: directed content analysis, manifest content analysis, thematic content analysis, latent content analysis, and qualitative sentiment analysis. Out of these 5, De Guzman had implemented 4 of these. The final one is on its way to publication. So if you're a serious researcher, you would wish, sana all, that our brains can handle both quantitative and qualitative methods with ease. Alan De Guzman is largely a single methods researcher. So compare that to yours truly. Since 2010, I have been a big fan of what is called mixed methods, the so-called third wave of research paradigms. Simply put, mixed methods sees researchers implement both quantitative and qualitative designs and methods in the entire research process, from the research question up to the conclusion. Integration in this entire research process is the centerpiece of mixed methods. If you have implemented both quant and qual, but you only integrated after presenting qualitative results and qualitative findings, quantitative results and qualitative findings, I should say, that is not mixed methods. It also pays that you implement mixed methods with another discipline. For me, I work with an economist, former Thomasian Alvin Ang of the Ateneo de Manila University, and we developed a mixed methods tool to address a basic issue surrounding overseas Filipinos, which is to use their remittances productively in the rural areas where they came from. And we called our tool Ricard. That's the full name over there. And we had done this in 5 rounds and 8 municipalities spanning 8 years. The 5th round was my doctoral thesis. And I kind of invested as much effort to get this many quantitative and qualitative data. I combined household surveys with an overarching set of qualitative methods called the rapid qualitative inquiry, introduced by an American who's married to a Filipina. I just got lucky that even if I'm not a human geographer by training, the immersion to interdisciplinary social science research and to mixed methods helped me explore methods never been combined. I was even able to formulate a new theory on remittances, but that has yet to be written to a journal. That is why I strongly believe that mixed methods yields many creative, innovative possibilities. And we at the University of Santo Tomas Journalism School quietly tried mixed methods and produced some success. This first one was a product of 2 undergraduate theses that were integrated. A phenomenology was done, and the themes from phenomenological findings became a survey instrument. The second paper On the journalism internship, tried some combinations, numeric scores and qualitative comments from an internship evaluation form, and key informant interviews with mentors. Here, we combined word cloud analysis, themes from the interviews, and structural equation modeling. That's a very technical term, but said to be one of the, second level types of statistical tests. In a sense, these multiple year efforts to pilot mixed methods and some individual methods have led me, to success and failure. Nevertheless, the point here is that we are trying to expand our methodological repertoire. We try to learn new methods and we even write about it. While I am still alive, I hope I can invent a method. And like Dr. Herminia Corazon Alfonso, make a theory I formulated to be recognized and empirically tested globally. I'm sure that all of you in this room and on social media can do the same. We wait to see the day that Filipino-rooted realities get studied innovatively, and we Filipinos provide newer knowledge, newer theories, and newer empirical contributions or even methods to the world, without any global north, global south demarcation lines. That is why the final part of this sharing will leave you with 5 reflective questions. 1. Is our epistemology ready for new frontiers? If even the biased disciplinal scholars and methodologists themselves have questioned their own epistemology, are we willing to do the same? 2. Are you open or close-minded to interdisciplinarity? Imagine the study of trolling, and you have a project that involves scholars from communication or journalism, linguistics, sociology, psychology, and even computational social science. Remember that historically, I may be wrong, so kindly correct me, communication is criticized for not having its own body of knowledge. The reality even made communication scholars produce some special issues in the top communication journals, carrying fancy titles or themes of those special issues such as Ferment in the Field and The Unbearable Lightness. In short, communication theories have been formulated with the aid of other disciplines, but not from within itself. Communication interacts with other disciplines in terms of theory. I surmise there's no reason for communication to disregard interactions with other disciplines in terms of methods, or even try the methods of others. 3. What is the role of mentoring here? If you have been skilled at adopting varied quantitative and qualitative designs and methods, are you ready to share to today's young blood? Will you have the humility that even if you broach methodological ideas with your students or to your students, they will be the lead authors and not you in prospective journal article submissions? For example, from last year's journalism graduates, this pair employed a methodology called Discursive News Values Analysis, or the DNVA, that being a method developed by a journalist and a linguist. This pair stretched the methodology by conducting key informant interviews with editors. And the product of their thesis was they introduced a new news value suited to the Filipino context. Another example is this pair. They adopted a method developed by a Japanese psychologist in the early 1990s called the Personal Attitude Construct, or PAC analysis, which was even implemented by a Japanese communication scholar. PAC analysis papers usually produce associative words that first come to mind to someone surrounding a phenomenon or lived experience, and that were subjected to factor analysis, as visualized by a dendrogram here. Then, these individualized PAC analysis papers are presented as separate stories in usual PAC journal articles. So what the two students did was they treated the PAC analysis findings as a whole. Then they extended the methodology by producing a set of phenomenological findings and another set of case study findings. So if we try to present these extensions of the methodology to Japanese psychologists, I wonder if they'll like it or not. Thus, mentoring matters since mentoring provides the first immersion to see the many methodological possibilities unfold right before your very eyes. Fourth, If we want to be methodologically innovative, but we do not have the literal means or the wherewithal to do so, can we become innovative? What are financially required by individual disciplinal departments in our universities? How can we know what's going on worldwide if we do not have the means to subscribe to not just the journals, but to the Web of Science and to Scopus, the world's two leading scholarly indexing sources for research? Some universities even do not have subscriptions to SPSS or the statistical package for the social sciences, or to qualitative data analysis software such as NVivo or MaxQDA. So to address the information gaps and asymmetry, me and my journalism students will try an experiment inspired by this book on user experience research methods and tools. We'll produce packaged materials on methods, put these methods together in accessible language, and produce a new learning material. This learning material, once finished, will be shared to these current and future journalism students and to the academic departments across our university. This effort is supported by the Research Center for Social Sciences and Education. And we hope that these packaged materials become readily available information online. What we are trying to impart here is the message that if Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant continue to improve their skills as they progress in their careers, then researchers may have to upgrade their skills too through continuing education. And fifth, how do we bridge the divides between the global North and the global South, the Philippines versus the world scholars, and even Imperial Manila and the rest of the Philippines? If you and your department has been doing innovative research stuff, are you happy with grandstanding about your versatility? Will you be more happy if you share your blessings to fellow Filipinos who can do the same? And here we share an ongoing pilot at the UST Journalism School. We quietly formed an informal network of J schools called the Filipino Journalism Studies Consortium, with friends from Rizal, Cavite, Bulacan, and Cebu provinces. The aim of our informal experimental consortium is to do collaborative, multiple area journalism studies research that innovates its methods, captures the rigors of sample sizes, and hopefully see our partner schools get published in the ranked journals in journalism and communication. All 5 of us schools admit to needing catch-up in research. So together, teachers and students will promote a spirit of collective action, shared success, generosity, and humility. We hope and pray that our experiment works, seeing our partner J schools getting published and implementing innovative methods too. Let me provide some concluding remarks. I think we researchers can learn a thing or two from humility. That if we allow ourselves to listen to others, regardless if they are right or wrong, we absorb their perspectives. In journalism, if journalists listen to all sides of the story, including the stakeholders they dislike, the situation provides a broader outlook at the story being reported. The same approach also follows with research. I also leave you with a thought to ponder. Are you ready to dare yourself and explore other methodological boundaries with at least knowing the numerous variegated research designs and methods? Innovating methods, again, does not overlook research questions. The congruence of the elements of research can be made innovative on the overall to include rigor. We may just have to be brave. Look at this cultural anthropologist, H. Russell Bernard, who developed a website on quant and qual methods. He says, and I quote from his book, "Whatever our epistemological differences, the actual methods by which we collect and analyze our data belong to everyone across the social sciences." That's why our research center at UST started by simply having a nook at our office containing materials on the numerous quant and qual methods around, as well as helpful stuff about methods. So what about your own politics surrounding research methods? Again, I will say it again, we respect what you want to do. We hope you listen to what others are doing. but discriminating the methods of others, even while legitimate and in the guise of data gathering, just drags us to the quantitative, qualitative debates that never end. Instead, why not see the light of what R. Burt Johnson calls inclusive science? Inclusive science, he says, includes and respects important reductionisms, but it rejects reduction to any single one-way thought so that we researchers become rationally defensible to multiple stakeholders, end quote. Johnson's point leads us to the advantage of mixed methods, of complementing each other's strengths, addressing each other's weaknesses, and of learning from all research traditions and branches of knowledge. If you want to visualize how this integration works, we borrow a thought from another mixed methodologist, a Japanese, Hisako Kakai. A mixed methods way of thinking is like your latte. That latte goes beyond either the coffee or milk and mixes the two. I hope the sharing did not trigger you to become too adversarial to me. Will there be a possibility in the immediate future that there are no more research paradigm wars? And like these two combatants, they become happy ever after? With the epistemological politics of methods still present, friends pa rin tayo, ha? Maraming salamat po and good afternoon.
Okay, now we go to the third segment and we'll try to do this quickly. We are going to talk about axiology and more specifically in the context of the implementation of the research itself. So kanina parang mas design, selection of methods, but now we go to how it happens in the field. My segment of this talk is really very, very brief. All I want to push for is for us, the researchers, to pay more attention to our value judgments as scholars by documenting our experiences and including such readings in our reading list for our students, because we normally just focus on substantive reading lists, but let us look at more methodological reading lists that look into the axiological dimensions of how we do research. So to let you have a better understanding of what I'm pushing for and what I think I would like you to consider are these example articles. So we have, for example, this article from Randall and colleagues on the power of the interviewer. So they try to document what exactly is the impact of the interviewer in the research process, because the way the interviewers influence the data gathering procedure will, of course, impact on the quality of data and findings that we will get. So they did a very systematic study of that by analyzing data gathering manuals and conducting interviews with several stakeholders. And they found out that despite protocols put in place to ensure standard implementation of sampling and interview procedures, the influence of interviewer judgment and interviewer respondent social dynamics remain. So, and they have several recommendations for addressing that. We have another study. So examples lang to para mayroon lang tayong idea saan ba natin pwedeng dalhin yung agenda of doing research on axiological processes. So we have critical reflections on social injustice and participatory action research. So the two scholars did a study on using PAR in a community, an indigenous Aita community, and they had a hard look at the impact of PAR by evaluating what they did against the social and political conditions of the area. And they ended with a statement that the notion that empowerment can be achieved through community participation in action research is an exaggerated assumption that should be avoided. And then we have this very nice article, Interviewing Fathers, Feminist Dilemmas in Fieldwork. So the researcher Caroline Gatrell did a study on the experiences of employed women in the UK. Being a feminist researcher, she decided she will privilege the voices of women, which means excluding the men in the data construction procedures. But as the research progressed, she saw more and more the need to include the voices of men. And she had to confront what she called the uneasy relationship between the practical requirements of the research design and the political ideals of the feminist project, coming from her realization that she cannot effectively explore what it is that she wanted to study if she did not include the views of others, and she had to do that even if this did conflict with her original aim of listening only to the voices of women. And she ends with a reminder that I think every one of us could relate to, that the empirical researcher, no matter how well prepared, may at some point be required to enter territories which she had not sought to explore and which may appear to be less well charted than expected. So that readiness, that flexibility, that open-mindedness that have been mentioned by the other two speakers come into play also when we are in the field. And finally, we have this paper for emotional fieldwork in critical geopolitical research. So coming from a Singaporean researcher, if I'm not mistaken, a study on violence and terrorism in the Philippines, did his fieldwork in Mindanao, and kept a diary of the entire research process, and from there extracted some realizations. One of these is that he was engaging in a conscious or an unconscious process of othering the rebel informant on the basis of an object without understanding his confrontations. Yung object is the gun. Without understanding his confrontations with the cruel daily realities of fear and violence. And he also came into contact with families, and one of these is the daughter of someone who had died, and he had to, handle, how do you deal with the grief of this child? And his reflections led him to realize that the unintended interactions with a group of children, the unexpected witnessing of terror and violence through the face of the other, and the collapse of emotional distance between me and the little girl are clear manifestations of the messiness of research. Emphasis on the messiness of research because I think axiology and reflexivity in general makes us realize that despite the rigid protocols, despite the procedures, the cookbook style guidelines that we follow, in the end, when we go to the field, there is indeed a messiness of research that we have to contend with. Will that discourage us? The author concludes by saying, this, however, does not point to the futility of academic pursuit. For me, it simply makes it more real. So this is my call for, us paying more attention to axiology by giving, or reflexivity, by giving it a space in the literature and not just treating it as some marginal notes in our research report. And talking of axiology, so yung ganong reflexivity we normally associate also with qualitative research, but we have here for our last speaker, Dr. Elma Laguna, who will talk about axiology in the setting of quantitative research. So Dr. Laguna, take it away.
Okay, let me just share my slide. Okay, so good afternoon again. No, I'm the this will be the last presentation for this webinar. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Violeda Umali for inviting me to join this webinar. I do have a communication research background. That's my undergrad. However, I admit that my research has since revolved around population and development issues such as youth studies, family planning and reproductive health, aging, and family relations, migration, and most of the time it involves large surveys. So Dr. Umali has shared some of the works on this topic, on the axiology of research, and my task this afternoon is to share how this is done in practice. I have to admit, though, that this is something that I have not really given much thought as a researcher, but working on this presentation, it forced me in a way to organize ideas and document experiences, and I think this is something that should be done and should be explored, worth exploring in the future. So when we talk about axiology, specifically in quantitative research, it's about asking the question, how do we value different aspects of research? For example, our research participants, our field interviewers, the data that we gather from them, and finally, the consumers of our data. I will focus, however, more on the participants and the field interviewers for this sharing of experiences. But before that, let me just share. Now, the Australian Research Council came up with these guide questions on how to ensure ethical research, ethical behavior in research. I'm sure you have encountered these questions before, especially when we submit our proposal for ethics review. Most of the time, these are the questions that we need to answer. What values will you live by or be guided as you conduct your research? What ought to be done to respect participants' rights? What are the moral issues and characteristics that need to be considered? Which cultural, intercultural, and moral issues arise, and how will you address them as a researcher? How to secure the goodwill of participants? How shall I conduct the research in a socially just, respectful, and peaceful manner? And how shall I avoid or minimize risk or harm, whether it be physical, psychological, legal, social, economic, or other? And before I share our experiences in the field and how we address these questions, let me briefly discuss the 4 criteria of ethical conduct. There's teleology. It's the theory of morality, which postulates that doing what is intrinsically good or desirable. It refers to attempts made in research to make sure that research results in a meaningful outcome that will satisfy as many people as possible. Then there's also the deontology, an understanding that every action that will be undertaken during the research will have its own consequences, intended to benefit participants, the researcher, the scholastic community, and the public at large. Thus, it allows for flexibility to deal with individual participants of observation. And then we have the morality. It refers to intrinsic moral values that will be upheld during the research. And finally, the idea of fairness and the criteria of fairness, the need to be fair to all research participants and to ensure that their rights are upheld. So how do we apply this in the field? I will share with you experiences from the 2 surveys that I am currently involved in. So first, it's the longitudinal cohort study of the Filipino child. This is quite an ambitious study. It started in 2016 and was designed to continue until 2030. No? And so far, we have completed 5 waves and are currently doing data collection for the 6th wave. So why do a study? No? Why do a longitudinal study of children? The teleology. No? It's because in terms of analysis, a longitudinal design is more powerful. So the idea of the study is to track key milestones in the lives of cohort participants, in this case, Filipino children, starting when they were age 10, 1 year after the Sustainable Development Goal started. No? It was in 2015, then we started the study in 2016. So we started with 10-year-old in 2016. And we plan to track them, no? To follow them through until they reach age 24. That's the end of SDG in 2030. So why we do this? Because we want to have data that link factors and outcomes. No? That's something that we cannot get from a cross-sectional research design. So in this kind of research, what's the value of the participants? So how do we see the participants, the children? So compared to cross-sectional study, we establish relationship with your participants through time, simply because you visit them every wave, no, or every year. So you see them first. No, the first encounter was when they were 10. Now they're about 16, 17. No, they went through a lot. No, they went through a pandemic, as well as a lot of other milestones. No, high school elementary graduation, maybe a family breakup. And some, we already have respondents who got pregnant, no, and already starting their own family. So when they were younger, their parents can still cajole them to participate, pwede pang takutin, no, to participate in a study. But at 15, no, 16, they can basically decide on their own and they can say no. So we also see them because we also collect anthropometric measures. So we measure their weight, their height. So you see them change physically, no? And when we started interviewing them at 10, it's okay if you assign a girl respondent to a male interviewer, for instance. But when they started puberty at 13, 14, no, there's already this awkwardness. So we revise our protocol. So we always assign a male respondent to a male interviewer, and a female respondent to a female interviewer. So those are the things that you have to take into account. So we always put emphasis in getting consent from adult family member, because they were children. They still are children now when we started interviewing them. So usually it's the adult family member, the mother particularly, and the mother is also a respondent, because with LCS, the longitudinal cohort, it's a multi-actor survey as well. So we have the caregivers questionnaire and the index child questionnaire, as well as the household questionnaire. And once we get the consent, we get the child's assent. No? That child has to agree to be interviewed, as well as agreed to be measured. No? And there's also child protection protocol in case we encounter cases of child abuse, and we did. What is the protocol? We made it clear to our field interviewers, personnel, that it is not their job to address these kinds of issue. So because they're not trained, but they have to refer such case to field supervisor, and then the field supervisor will refer that to the project team leaders. And we provide contact numbers. On the field, what we usually do is just provide them with contact numbers of agencies or person to contact, no, if there is such case, no, of abuse. So another important consideration when you're doing a longitudinal study is to ensure that you keep attrition low. So in LCS, when we started, we assumed that the attrition will be about 5% in every wave, which leave us with enough number of cases or sample size in the final wave. But of course, we underestimated how mobile urban residents are, and also as young as they are. No? At 10, 11, 12, we have already reports of several deaths from our sample. So we always take extra steps to ensure that we keep them in every wave. And we do this by giving tokens, for example, or incentive to participate, both for the parent, the caregiver, and the child. In the beginning, we were giving material token like pencil case, pencil, then ball pen. And then when the pandemic hit, we have to resort to a phone interview. That's when we started giving money. And we are giving money now, because it's also easier for the field personnel to just give money rather than to carry material tokens around. We also make sure that we keep the same set of interviewers. Why? Because it as I mentioned earlier, you establish relationship. There's already a level of trust, and people, and children particularly, they feel comfortable if they know that the interviewer is the same as the one who interviewed them before. So when we started in the initial waves, we only requested to collect contact numbers of the respondents, meaning the phone numbers, in our ethics review application. But in succeeding waves, particularly when we were doing phone interviews, during the pandemic, we realized that they change phone number every so often. So we also need to collect their social media accounts. In fact, this happened when we were doing wave 5. We found a lot of our respondents through Facebook. So these are the adjustments that we need to make in the field. And finally, we have, okay, I'll go back to the field personnel later. I will just discuss another one, another survey that we did during the pandemic. This was the 2021 Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study. We just released the findings last week. So I'm sure you have encountered some of the results that we found. Everything is down. Vices, sex, but mental health issues up. So those are the interesting findings of the status of the youth, Filipino youth during the pandemic. We started negotiating as early as 2018 to undertake this survey. But with bureaucracy, because it's funded by DOH and with UP, it took some time for the project to get the green light. So, and when it did, it was already 2020, and the pandemic happened. We thought about postponing it, but at the same time, we also know that we need to have data on experiences of young people during the pandemic. It's a rare event. So we pushed through with the data collection and adjusted our protocol. So we have to do all training online, take into account public health protocols, get our field staff vaccinated, including the budget, PPE, mask, alcohol, medicines, as well as testing, and allow for more flexibility in case a member of the team gets COVID, and it happened to us. We have several teams who got infected and has to be quarantined. So what does it mean? Field correction has to stop for the period of the quarantine. So that's why when we did this, it was August until it lasted until January of 2022. That's the height of the Delta variant. So which brings me to the last point. This is about the value of the field personnel. We have to remember that they are our frontliners. Are linked to the data source. So it's important that before we field them, they are properly trained on research protocol, the use of questionnaire, and when we shifted to copy, they have also we have to teach them also how to use the gadget as well as to sync data. And with COVID, we added protection, not just accident. We just don't provide accident insurance and health insurance. We also provided for testing before they go on the field. And every time they visit a new area, depends on the requirement of the LGU. So, and finally, at the end of the field work, we provided debriefing. With YAPS, there were several regions where we hired a psychologist, for instance, to help the team process their experience on the field. So, yeah. So, well, what's my what can I say about doing a national study survey in time of COVID or during a pandemic? It's still feasible, but you have to adjust. A lot of protocols have to be revised. But will it change the accuracy of data collected, for instance? In our case, well, except for we get a much lower response rate compared to before, it's still, I think, we were still able to ensure that the estimates that we're getting are valid. So that's all. Thank you.
So Elma, tapos na?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you to everyone. And now it is the time for the open forum. So maybe I will request the resource persons to be on cam kung kaya ng bandwidth. And yeah, now we are ready to accept questions. Kasi konti na lang yung time, so let us proceed directly to the Q&A. Although I have yet to see questions posted.
There's a question that was posted, ma'am, directly to me.
Sige.
Okay, so the question is, in your respective researches, how do you practice community-based data validation as part of the ethical conduct of research? What best practices do you recommend, especially involving vulnerable sectors?
Okay, so sinong unang sasagot? Maybe, Elma, ikaw, nag-on cam ka na.
Okay. So we also collect community data, by the way, because these are also important factors. We realize that, and somehow this community data information that we collect, it also validate the findings, particularly with LCS, for instance. So we have information on crime rate, on poverty, at the barangay level or municipality level. And then we validated with reports of hunger in the household experienced by index child of the children. So that's one way of validating and involving community. And yeah, if I also, when you're doing longitudinal, that's always the challenge because you always go back to the same community until they know you already. Like I remember when Taal volcano erupted in 2020, January of 2020, we were doing wave 4 of LCS at the time, and there were several barangays in Batangas, sample barangays in Batangas that were affected. So you, of course, you have to check them, no? your respondents, and also the state of the barangay. Whether you can go back and do the field work, and we, as much as possible, that's also how do you establish goodwill. So we donate, for instance, electric fan or some equipment in the barangay, because yeah, we will still be going back to this barangay. So it's nice that you have that kind of relationship to people there.
Ayan, Cheryll.
Yeah. So yeah. So for my project, I can speak about two. Yung isa, yung Facebook project namin on bullying and harassment, or generally bullying and harassment on social media, that was completed just recently. So that project was done mostly during the pandemic, but to be able to help us have the young people we interviewed kind of validate our findings, we invited the same young people whom we interviewed. Of course, not all of them. I mean, given all the limitations and difficulties of the pandemic, we invited them again at the stage when we already had the chance to look at the data, distill the themes, and come up with some initial interpretations. So we invited them again and run through them what we thought, and if they had any further recommendations or suggestions. And I'm glad you raised this because minsan yung budgeting natin, right? So sometimes as researchers, we might think of, when we are designing our projects, we might think of the budget for the actual conduct of the research, but not the conduct of the member checking or the validation interviews, and that is a crucial aspect of the research as well. The other one is where when we did a study on privacy and young people in PisoNets. So ganun din yung ginawa namin. We had another session thinking about this time sharing what we found, but also asking the young people what they thought might be the possible forms of intervention that are relevant to their condition. So, so I agree with where the question is coming from. While communicative validity of the scholars in our field is important, as we publish, as we get reviewed in journals, etc., the validation from our research respondents on whether our interpretations do make sense is also as crucial.
Well, in general, I think validity in terms of going back to respondents or to yourselves as researchers, or to, let's say, some critical friend matters. If you can do a combination of these three or all three, correspondence analysis with your respondent, member checking with your fellow researchers, or critical friend with somebody who is not involved in the study, but you think can give a comment to it, that's fine. And well, into the question on community level validation, of course it depends on the study, but if I remember right, during the methodology that we developed together with the economists, we have implemented that in 5 rounds, and what we organize are what we call hometown conferences. It's a way for us to thank them, but to give them back the findings fairly and squarely. And then we get further comments and issues from the research participants, plus the members of the community. So those hometown conferences serve as a way to help us finalize the papers. So that you can do similar experiences, of course. But Cheryl was right in saying that it has to be budgeted. The validation has to be budgeted. I think even in the undergraduate thesis, we kind of forget that. But I think that matters too.
Mali, may tanong pa ba?
No, na-cover na nila lahat yung points. So, yeah. Walang questions kami.
Kaya I think I had a question about how do we get started? Kasi di mo parang the challenge with the masterclass is we give the big picture, but sometimes it can also lead to parang people then stop from doing things. I think in question is how do we get started now with what you've shared, and how do we check that we are in the right direction?
If I may start, Dean, I guess the way to start is, well, to log on to your computer and Google lang. Yung mga ginagawa naman namin, Google lang for a start. And then, of course, if we implement it, trial and error. Talagang I think it's normal. And then you share your experiences. And then, of course, the usual activities surrounding the research process. And then you get also comments through validation activities. So, like what I had shared earlier, those are products of Google search, actually. And then we were able to make some purchases, like me personally, the book that I showed earlier. And then we'll try to see how it could be spread to everybody. Kasi siguro yun nga, parang access to information also matters. That's why I also brought up the point about Metro Manila versus the rest. And I guess the association which convenes this activity wants to, I think I may be wrong, but it wants the association wants to at least bridge the divides in terms of scholarly production, not Metro Manila versus the rest, but Philippines. So wherever we are in the archipelago, we produce and contribute the knowledge. Pero Google lang din ang umpisa niyan.
Sige, ako. Dito ko ibabalik yung sinasabi ko kanina that we need a more systematic documentation of our research experiences. Kasi normally, when we talk about publishing, we focus on substantive content, di ba? What's the latest on empirical research on something. But katulad ng papers na pinakita ko kanina, these are very excellent papers that document yung mga realizations of the researchers, which impact really on how we do things. Na para bang if we could take the time to document them more formally and present them in the manner that we do our scholarly research in general, the same rigor that goes into writing research reports. I think that is our way of one way of knowing whether we are how we move forward and whether we are on the right track. Kasi kahit naman if you look at those papers that were documented, there are also reflections on we need to further look into this. So ang maganda kasi if we come up with a systematic way of documenting and publishing those works, mas nakikita ng mas maraming researchers. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, sana hindi sila mag-remain as marginal notes in the research reports that we are writing. Sana ma-elevate sila into scholarly papers that can be read and more importantly, shared with our students. Kasi yung ganong insights, mahirap makita kapag hindi natin nailagay in a document that is accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah, I guess for me, what it says that what I like about the position of our panel is that it comes in after all those many sessions within this webinar series. And I think what it tells us that although of course in research methods are crucial, it is hard when you come to the research and meron ka ng method kaagad. So to respond to the question, where do you begin? Well, at the end of the day, you begin with thinking about what you really want to study. What are the purposes or influences shaping what you study, and perhaps the framework, the review of literature, all of those that have been covered by the past series kind of influence that And then you reflect on how your methods are appropriate to your object of investigation, to your framework, and so on and so forth. So, feeling ko tahi sila na yung iba't ibang elements ng series na ito, and I hope you will position this panel within that continuum.
Ayan, ma'am. I think thank you for our panel. It's 4:56. But maybe we can request everyone to turn on your camera so we can have a picture taken. Ayan, mag-group picture naman tayo. Asan ba ako? Hindi ko, I cannot locate myself. Asan na yun? Okay, so there are two panels, so please hold your smile. Hold on. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. And then the second panel, we don't know in which panel we're appearing, so please hold your smile. 1, 2, 3. Ayan. Maraming salamat, Dr. Umali, Dr. Laguna, Dr. Soriano, and Dr. Opiniano. Di ba ang ganda ng shinare nila sa atin yung hapon na ito. I know it will take time for us to digest, you know what they said. That's why we upload videos, no? Because I know that a lot of you review afterwards. Ayan, so next week, not next week, the next webinar on November 10 will be our last installment in the 7-part series. It will be on reporting research as hermeneutical activity. So this is essentially dissemination, no? And our speakers will be Dr. Pamela Custodio of UP Los Baños College of Development Communication, Dr. Leslie Liwanag of the Central Luzon State University, and Dr. Cheryll of the UP College of Mass Communication. So, alam niyo nang gagawin, please register, or if you have registered, we will send you the link. That's for November 10. That will be a slight change. It will be a Thursday. So please note this, a Thursday, again, from 3 to 5 p.m. And here's the link. It's the same link that we have been using, bit.ly /PACMRI eval 2022 for the evaluation form. And please make sure that you've watched the video before accomplishing the evaluation form. Ayan. So maraming salamat sa inyong lahat, at kita-kita tayo sa last installment of this Masterclass in Mentoring webinar series. So bye everyone.